Right. Thank you. All right, go for it.
Yeah, so I'll backtrack a little bit. So I think one of the things that's really fascinating, you know what? I'm gonna record it too.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, this is really valuable knowledge.
Yeah, no, I listen, trust me, I haven't had a chance to write about it, but one of the things that I find really fascinating that isn't talked about very often is M&A within the as it relates to immigration. So just to go from the perspective of a tech company, let's say you're hiring H-1B workers, you have your fundraising, you've got your Series A, your Series B. Um, from an M&A perspective, I have been to conferences and there have been large companies talking there on this topic, and they were basically like, look, when we acquire a technology company, a smaller one, this company might have 10,000, 15,000 global employees. They take on, they buy for 100 million, this startup that's building something cool that has, 200 or 300 employees. And of those people, let's say 50 to 80, I don't know, I'm just throwing out numbers, are H-1B workers. There's probably a small law firm supporting that tech company. But with this acquisition, at least when I went to this conference and heard this one big tech company discuss, it's black and white. When you acquire someone, their legal counsel, you say goodbye to them, and you're now part of our immigration lawyers are now going to take on your case. So if we go back to the perspective of the small, mid-sized, whatever immigration law firm supporting that startup, and it's been awesome because maybe they started with the startup from the beginning and they helped them through their seed round, through their Series A, through their Series B, and the partners are like, this is amazing. Our firm is going to grow with this client. We're going to get more capacity. We're going to take on more clients. And then turns out your client's going to get acquired, which is what a lot of startups want to do. But instead of you being a beneficiary of that acquisition, you've been axed because of the acquisition. So I think that's really fascinating. I don't know how often this happens. Maybe it's more of a conversation. Maybe some large entities that do a lot of acquisitions have black and white policies. Perhaps others don't. I don't know. But this does happen. And I think for law firms, it's important to think about if you're growing and you're relying on a small number of firms, a small number of clients that continue to grow, you still have to remember that there can be an instance where that firm disappears, even if you're not doing bad work, even if you're doing amazing work, because they get acquired and you're just no longer going to be part of that immigration process. So the reason I thought about this was that, like, as you're growing and as your clients are growing, you cannot rest on your laurels. You have to continue to build your brand, to build your sales funnel, maybe for the rainy day, right? In case that something does happen. But even more generally, just to make sure that your eggs are not all in one basket and you're sort of diversifying your business. So yeah, that's a lot could be said about that, but I think that's a really kind of niche topic that firms don't think about a lot, and they're just laser focused on growth. But it's like, you got to back up a little bit and do some risk analysis of what happens if, and then plan for that.
Yeah, I know. And a lot of people in the COVID-19 crisis are like, the what happens if is right now.
Exactly. Yep.
And they didn't necessarily plan for it. But it also, like, this isn't a typical thing to think of you need to plan for. They plan for, like, okay, we got a good lease, we got a good technology person, like we have really good employees, like if we need to, there's a few people we can outsource to. And they just don't put the actual thought into, like, oh, like we actually have like a human problem, not necessarily a market problem or an economic problem. We actually just have an issue. Like, people can't even come to our country right now.
Right. Exactly.
A lot of instances.
Exactly.
But CIS is closed, which is, and if someone's watching this in 5 years, like that's a big deal happening right now. And it's, I don't see things going back completely to normal. So it's like anything.
I agree with you. And I think it's definitely not, I mean, who knows, but it's probably there are going to be some fundamental changes going forward. I think the firms and companies in general always need to have sort of a negative Nancy or a naysayer to be, to just think of the worst possible scenario and plan at least partially for it. Because yeah, to your point, no one, you can argue whether or not this pandemic was quote unquote foreseen or not, but you typically as a business cannot foresee all of the potential negative outcomes. You don't want to. You want to focus on the good things, but you always need to have someone to say, all right, imagine the servers shut down and you can't do this stuff for 3 weeks. What's going to happen? Imagine your largest client just someone dies and like the relationship, fail. Like the worst possible thing that can happen, you have to consider it at least theoretically and have at least some potential plan, if not an active plan for that kind of thing. So again, I think for the M&A piece, that's not very theoretical. It's very practical, and it happens. And it happens in a weird time where, again, as a law firm, your client is doing well and they're growing and they're raising more money, and you're doing well and you're providing them with support. But if they want an exit and that exit leads to them no longer being able to work with you, there's nothing you could have done. That's just part of the deal. So the question is then, how do you deal with it going forward? So
I think it's a question every entrepreneur needs to ask himself. Yeah.
Cool, yeah.
Well, it's been good being on here, Roman. So I really appreciate your time today and everything. I actually do have to get running. So
For sure.
absolutely. So